Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and today I'm going to show you how I made these kitchen cabinet doors for my sister's new kitchen. Cabinet doors are the face of your cabinets. I know, thank you, Captain Obvious. But seriously, all cabinets are basically the same thing, just a simple box. But the doors, oh, the doors, those are the stars of the show. So when my very traditional sister asked me to build her new cabinets, of course the doors were a major concern. She didn't want a standard shaker style door with a flat square frame and inside panel. No, she wanted a decorative edge along the inside of the door frame. I don't have a lot of fancy cabinet door making tools, so I took the poor man's approach to building these, and they turned out honestly better than I expected. But enough chit chat, let's get to the how-to. I've got the step-by-step tutorial posted for you at the link in the description below, but I'll show you how they came together right here. The first thing I did for this was determine my lumber choice. For this situation, I was building my sister brand new cabinets, and she wanted them painted white. So I went with poplar for the door frames and 1/4 inch birch plywood for the panels. I chose these options because they're easy to work with and paint really well. However, if you aren't painting and are simply just replacing doors on existing cabinets, you probably want to match the wood species that you make your doors out of to the color of the cabinets that you already have. I built these cabinet doors with simple frames and floating panels. There are a million ways to make a door, but this method is fairly simple and it worked well with the tools that I already had. The first thing I did was cut a dado on one edge of my 1x3 poplar pieces. I've been wanting a dado blade for a while, specifically for things like this, and Diablo sent me theirs. Used to, I'd have to make 3 passes per board to cut a 1/4 inch dado, and it was never a nice tight fit, but using this dado blade allowed me to only make 1 pass per board and have a super nice tight fit with my plywood panels. So I set up my blade to be a 1/4 inch from the rip fence and a 1/4 inch high. Since my 1x3s were 3/4 inch thick, this would put my dado right in the center of the board. Once all the dados were cut, there were 28 boards, by the way. 28 8-foot boards. Anyway, once they were all cut, I began routing a decorative edge. Because my sister likes to make things difficult, she didn't just want a plain shaker style door. She wanted the inside edge to have a little something something. So I used my trim router and a roundover bit to cut a nice roundover edge on the same side of the board as the dado. Again, 28 boards later, we were finally ready to start making the doors. Side note, I will admit that this really did make the doors look nicer than a standard plain square edge, but it added quite a bit of work. See next step. Here we go. Because my sister wanted this decorative edge, I couldn't simply butt join the frames together because then the edges wouldn't line up, so they had to be mitered. This made things a little more difficult, but still doable. Stick with me, we can do this. So I measured the sizes that I needed my doors to be. You will have to measure your own for your particular style, whether it be inset, partial overlay, or full overlay. And I began cutting my pieces with 45-degree miters on each end. Now for a quick lesson in cabinet doors. So cabinets are typically made with either face frames or frameless. I prefer frameless, it's just saves a lot of time, saves a lot of money and extra lumber. Most people have cabinets with frames. So if you have a cabinet with face frames, if you're doing inset doors, subtract a 1/4 inch from both the height and the width of your frame opening to get your door size. For cabinets with face frames, if doing partial overlay, add 2 times whatever you want your overlay to be to the height and width of your inside opening. And be sure to get hinges that match your overlay. Typical overlays are a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and 1 inch. If doing a full overlay on either framed or frameless cabinets, just subtract a 1/4 inch from the height and width of your overall cabinet front box, not including the toe kicks. So back to the build. I made sure that the long sides were where I was measuring off of and that the short sides were the ones that had the dados and the roundover edge when I made my miter cuts. Basically, I cut the pieces to the size my door needed to be. So let's say I need a door 14 inches wide and 26 inches tall. So I cut 2 pieces 26 inches long along the longest edge and 2 pieces 14 inches long along the longest edge. So that when they fit together, the whole door is 14 by 26. So, makes sense? Once the frame pieces were cut, it was time for the panel. I'm going to hit you with a little bit of math, so don't freak out. If you're using true 1x3s, which are 2.5 inches wide, your panel should be about 4 5/8 inches narrower and 4 5/8 inches shorter than your door frame pieces. Got it? This should allow about 1/8 of an inch room for the panel to move within the frame for wood movement and some wiggle room when you glue it up. I cut my 1/4 inch plywood panel down using my jigsaw, but a circular saw or a table saw works fine too. Now for the fun part. I laid my frame out on my workbench and used a square to mark the lines along the diagonals of the corner. This is just to line up my dowel jig. Then I centered the center line on my dowel jig with these lines, clamped it, and drilled 2 dowel holes in each board end. Centering the center line of my dowel jig on these lines that I drew on the corners will help ensure that the dowel holes will line up properly at each corner. It's also helpful to mark your 4 frame pieces so that you know how they go back together once you're done. Once the holes were drilled, I used wood glue and dowels to join all of the corners. I found it easiest to put 3 pieces together, 1 short and 2 long, then slide the panel in place and then add the last piece of the frame. There's probably better ways of doing this, but that's how I did it and it worked fine. Once everything was together, I used some pipe clamps to clamp it in place and make sure it was nice and square and that my corners lined up well. Then I wiped away any excess glue so it will be easier to sand later. Once the glue was dry, I gave the corners a good sanding to make sure that everything was nice, smooth, and flush. Then I puttied the corners as needed if there were any small gaps or dents. I sanded again and caulked along the panel and the frame. I like to hang my cabinet doors using concealed hinges because they offer 3 different adjustments to get your door to hang just right. To do this, I drill a hole using my Craig concealed hinge jig, then I install the type of hinges that I'm using, inset, partial overlay, full overlay, etc., and follow the manufacturer's instructions for attaching those hinges to the cabinet. I've actually got a separate post that I will link right here to show you how I installed my own kitchen cabinet doors using full overlay hinges. And once the hinges are installed, it's ready to put onto the cabinet. For these doors, I installed them onto the cabinets to make sure that everything fit, and then I sent them to my sister's house. Once they were at my sister's house, we actually just removed the doors so that they would be easier to paint and then installed them back on later after the cabinets were installed onto the wall. You can see here where we installed these cabinets without the doors, and then I added the doors later and installed the cabinet door hardware. To finish the cabinet doors, I simply applied a coat of General Latex primer, then lightly sanded with 220 grit sandpaper once it was dry. Then I applied a high quality latex enamel paint with a small roller. I used 3 coats of paint to get good coverage. And once the doors were hung, I simply installed the hardware, and there was still a lot of work to do with trim and caulk and shelves and such, but at least at that point the doors were done. And that's the story of how I built the cabinet doors for my sister's kitchen. I really love this style door, and I really like that I didn't have to invest in expensive tools to make them. The extra decorative edge along the middle of the panel really makes it look professional too. So I hope this video has been helpful and inspiring, and if you want more details, be sure to head over to the blog post at the link in the description below. And if you like this video, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned for more info on how I designed and built her cabinets coming soon. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss it. Until next time, friends, happy building!